It's really important for me to know what is in my food and what the sugar levels are, but also whenever I can get fresh produce that I can preserve easily at home for my littles or my grandma, I try to preserve it. So if you're looking to cut costs on baby food or things that you want to serve your littles or any age of your family members, follow along for this video and I will teach you how to preserve pears to make them shelf stable. Hi, my name is Amy Cross and this is the Cross Legacy, where I teach you how to reduce your grocery bill by keeping your produce fresh longer as one of my main tips. If you didn't know, the average family throws away over 40% of the produce that they bring home, and I have tips to keep produce fresh for weeks. I also had a TED Talk on this topic, and I am a best-selling author of the book I Bought It Now What, which teaches produce tips for the top 75 produce items. So if you're looking for ways to keep your produce fresh longer and would like to see it in the written form, make sure you check out the description below and there is a link to the book. So let's get started on canning pears. All right, these pears, all of them here, were given to me by a family member and they were picked directly from the tree. Now, if you were picking pears up off the ground and they were already a little bit soft, you want to make sure that you're preserving them right away. They're not going to last very long. But since these were picked from the tree, I actually brought them home and was able to wash them in the vinegar wash that I talk about in my book and dry them before I put them in the refrigerator. So I just started last night canning these little jars and getting the first round of them to go through. So we had them for example today, but these will last for weeks if they were picked from the tree and they're not starting to bruise. But the main thing is to make sure that they're stored properly, and that is not near citrus. So you want to make sure that when you're storing your pears or your apples in your refrigerator, that you're not storing them next to other citrus fruits, which will make them spoil quicker. So that fruit bowl that you might have on your counter that has all the different beautiful fruits mixed together, those are actually going to spoil a lot quicker than if you separate them and put them in the refrigerator. So that being said, this is also the mesh bags that are from our storefront too. So if you're looking for produce bags that are reusable and organic, these are on our storefront, and that is linked in the description below also. So the pears that I canned already last night in a water bath canner, which I'll show you what that means in a second, but are these little half-pint jars. These are little tiny diced pieces that I had put in the jar to make it just easy for me to serve and not have to cut up smaller. Normally I'll do it in a wide mouth pint size. You can tell that I had these where the sun was shining on them a little bit too much. We love how beautiful the canned items are in our cabinets here behind us, but normally you would not store homemade canned items where the sunlight can get to it because it'll make it turn brown a little bit sooner. So my other canned items I have in a dark area of the house, not where the sun is shining. So these are like kind of just in bigger chunks of pears in a wide mouth pint jar. This is like a perfect size for, you know, just a couple of us to have with a meal. The quart sizes, I had canned these actually 3 years ago and they're still perfectly fresh because they were in the dark area. Can you see where the light is a little bit different? They're still fresh, they're just a little bit darker. But this quart size jar for our size family is too large and I just don't do them in the quart size jars anymore. I still do peaches in quarts, but for the pears, it's just too big for our family. So when you're starting to can things, think about how you want to use the items. And for us, these half pints are the size that are perfect. These jars only have water, pears, and a little bit of sugar. Now, I do use monk fruit a lot when I'm baking items and here in the house because I am diabetic, but there are no proven safe recipes right now for canning with monk fruit. So in the blog post linked with this, we will describe exactly how much that light sugar ratio should be for the size jar that you're using, because it's way too complicated to talk about in this video. All right, I am going to peel and dice these pears, but one of my tricks is to use a melon baller to get the seeds out, or a half teaspoon measuring spoon will do the same trick. So you don't have to go buy a new tool if you don't have a melon baller already. So I go down kind of close to the stem. This part you want to make sure that you get out of the stem. When I'm peeling it, I just hold it here in my hand and I do cut towards me. I use a knife to peel them because look how thin that is so that I can get in there. And they're so soft that a peeler doesn't work all the time. This always makes me think of my great Aunt Bertha. She could peel a whole apple in one strand. And that was a skill I worked on when I was first learning how to peel in my hand like this. I'm going to put them into these glass bowls with some water and lemon juice so they don't oxidize while we're getting the pears prepared. The pears prepared. Sorry, that one's staying. So for this, it's not part of the canning process, and you can either use fresh lemon juice or commercial lemon juice. I'm going to keep them this larger size to put in the water because it's easier to keep them below the water level. Yesterday when I was making them, it actually took me a few hours because I was getting busy with other duties and having to come back, so they were able to stay in the water longer and not oxidize. When I go to dice them up, I do it right before they go into the light syrup on the stove, and they're going to cook for about 5 to 10 minutes before we put them in the jars. So I'm just going to take them out, dice them up. This would be a great time if you like the pieces to be all uniform to use one of those automatic little chopper things that are on Amazon. I don't have one, but I was thinking last night, like, man, that would be a good project for this. So this is the sugar water. It's on the stove. The sugar has dissolved in there. I'm going to just keep dicing these up and putting them in there. If you wanted to can them whole or in slices, you wouldn't have to dice them. You would just put them right into the sugar water. So after these boil in the pan, I always make a little bit extra of the juice just so I have it to top off the jars. But I don't mind if we have a little bit extra of the water sugar syrup because we actually drink it as juice, or we can dilute it in more water if we want to. So it's okay to have a little bit extra of this juice. It's fresh pear juice and you know exactly the sugar content. Okay, so this method of canning is called water bath canning, and you can literally do this in any pot if you have a trivet or a rack at the bottom of it and you have at least 2 inches of water above your jars. So you might have a soup pot or a stock pot that will work for your smaller jars. If you have a trivet that you can put at the bottom, and I find when I'm doing this that my Instapot trivet is perfect for that. So I can slip it in the bottom of a pan and do a smaller batch of the smaller jars. So you don't can inside your Instapot, just that little wire rack can go into a normal pot on the stove. Mine, for my big pot here, looks like this, and it will hold all of the jars, and it has a handle on the side. I honestly never lift it up with the handle. It is too heavy for me, and I am too short when I get it on the stove to be able to lift it up over my nose. So I just use it like that, and then I use a jar lifter that looks like this. And every time I see these on Amazon, it cracks me up because the model that's doing it is doing it upside down in the picture. So this is the handle and this is the part that goes with the jar. So anyways, I just lift these out of the hot water with the jar lifter. You can buy these separate on Amazon or different places that you would get canning supplies. And then this is my water bath canner. It is humongous, and it will hold 7 of the quart-sized jars at a time. So these big jars at a time. So you can can any type of fruit and tomatoes in the water bath canner. If you're wanting to do different stocks that have meat in it or other items that are low acidity, you have to have a pressure canner, and that is a whole different discussion. So this is the canner. Then we have jars of whatever size that you want to can with. And then this is one of my little tricks that my grandma actually did, is she would put her extra rings on a piece of ribbon, and I just have these hanging in my pantry based on the size. So today we're using the regular mouth ones, but I have one for the wide mouth lids also, because you end up with a ton of these that are extra that you just need for your canning day. So these just hang on the string and they are out of the way like this. So right as you're getting ready to prepare to can, you want to make sure that you get boiling water into your big water bath canner and your jars in there, and they need to boil for at least 10 minutes to sterilize them. We're gonna add vinegar to the canning water. That'll help your jars come out cleaner if you add a little bit of vinegar to the jars. So I'm gonna turn off the the heat, and then I have a tray here, but I try not to get it in the crack. So if I do this right, I won't get liquid to go down there. This is a funnel, and I'm using a slotted spoon. So I'm trying not to get a lot of the juice and more of just the fruit right here at the beginning. Okay, this is called a debubbler. It comes in a canning accessory kit, and it's really important to use before you put the lid on, that you're going to just poke down in the jar and make sure any of the bubbles and air pockets get released in your jar. But on the other end of this, a lot of people don't know what this ladder is right here. When you're looking at a canning recipe, it will tell you how much head space to leave at the top of your jar. This little tool here will tell you exactly, I need a jar. This little tool right here will tell you exactly how much it is. So I'm looking for a 1/2 inch of head space, and it says in a little notch right there that this is a 1/2 inch, and you just put it in the jar this way and it'll show you exactly how far to fill up the jar. So it goes from a 1/4 inch to I think 1.5 inches, or just 1 inch. So 1 inch of headspace and then a 1/4 inch of headspace. So you can see whatever the recipe says that you're supposed to use, make sure you're checking that or your jars can bust. This is the vinegar. And we're just taking, this is a napkin, and you go around the top. Try not to touch it again after you do this. These lids are just in water, like they're not boiling water like you did in old school times, but I like to just get any dust off of them. You want to make sure when you're canning, you always use a brand new lid. You can recycle the rings and use them, and the glass and reuse them, but the lid is super important that you only can with it one time. These lids I do reuse for my pantry and my fridge items, but never to can twice, and you won't get a solid seal the second time. So those are gonna go on top, and then the rings. This is super important. So when you're putting the lid on, just using these 3 fingers, that's how you make it finger tight. You don't wanna crank it on because that will make the lid buckle or your jar break in the water. I hold the towel underneath and I check it just really lightly like that. And then after I pull it out of the water, then I'll tighten it up a little bit as it's on the towel because it loosens off. We're gonna grab this with the jar lifter. I always keep a towel or a pot holder in this hand just so I don't accidentally forget and grab the bottom of the jar. So we're gonna go right back into the water. And then we're gonna repeat this process a whole bunch until we have a full canner load. I always keep the jars in the hot water until I go to use them. It's really important. They use hot jars with hot fruit and hot syrup when you're canning. So for this size jar, we're going to do a rolling boil for 20 minutes. After this gets done for 20 minutes, then we're going to turn the heat off and let it calm down a little bit before we take it out and put it on the towels. So it boils for 20 minutes, and then there's about a 10-minute cool down period before we put them on the towels. So it's super important 24 hours after you're done canning that you're going to take your jar and you're going to take the ring off, and those get stored all year long on the ribbon or however you're going to store them. But your jar does not stay in the pantry with the ring on it. That can cause a false seal. So it's really important that 24-hour period you're taking off the ring. Then you take a rag and you clean it off. I just use a non-toxic kitchen spray and a clean rag and wipe it off. And then when it's dry, take a Sharpie and write on the top what it is and the year that you canned it. So those are some of the items. You have some of these already at home, and they're really inexpensive to buy if you're looking to start preserving your own fruit and vegetables.